Welcome to Family Revenge Secrets, the place where we uncover the most shocking betrayals and the most incredible stories of redemption. If you believe that blood is thicker than water, but sometimes that water is filled with poison, then you've come to the right place. Be sure to hit that subscribe button because the truth is always more dramatic than fiction. Today, we're diving into a story that proves even the most perfect picture can hide a monstrous secret. This is a story of a mother's unending love, a son's misplaced loyalty, and a daughter-in-law's unthinkable deception. This is The Perfect Daughter-in-Law and the Shocking Secret. My name is Martha. For as long as I can remember, the story of my life has been one of quiet devotion. My husband, Robert, was my son, and when he passed away, my world didn't just go dark, it became a blank canvas. There was nothing left but a memory and the quiet hum of a house that was now far too big for one. Robert left me a comfortable fortune, enough to live out my golden years without a single worry. But money, I learned, is a terrible substitute for a hand to hold. My world, once a vibrant tapestry of shared dreams, was reduced to a single thread: my son, David. At 50 years old, I had lived a full life, but I felt strangely empty, as though the best parts of my story had already been written. David was my only hope, my only legacy. He was a good boy, a bit too soft perhaps, but his heart was in the right place. I poured all my energy, all my love, all my purpose into him. My life became a series of his milestones: college graduation, his first job, his small triumphs, and his minor heartbreaks. I was an architect of his happiness, and it was a job I took with solemn reverence. Then she arrived. Her name was Victoria. David brought her home one crisp autumn afternoon, and the way she smiled at me was like a forgotten sunrise. She was everything I wasn't: vibrant, witty, and so full of life. She had a kind of gentle energy that filled the empty spaces in my home and in my heart. She sat on the worn floral couch that Robert had picked out, and as she talked about her work and her dreams, I didn't just hear words. I heard a melody I had been missing. David looked at her with an adoration that was both a comfort and a pang to my maternal heart. He had found his person, and in that moment, I believed I had found mine, too. I had always yearned for a daughter, a kindred spirit to share tea and confidences with, to talk about dresses and recipes and all the little things that filled a woman's life. In Victoria, I saw that dream made real. She was a gift from God, a second chance at family. From that day forward, our family of two became a family of three. Victoria was a master of the small, loving gesture. She'd bring me a bouquet of my favorite hydrangeas, just because, or send me a text in the middle of a busy workday to say, "Thinking of you, Martha." She'd remember a story I told her and bring it up weeks later, making me feel seen and heard in a way I hadn't since Robert was gone. She was respectful but not timid, loving but not smothering. She was, in every way, the perfect daughter-in-law. But looking back, I realize now that her perfection was a carefully constructed fortress. Her gratitude wasn't a spontaneous emotion. It was a well-practiced performance. Her affection wasn't a reflection of her soul. It was a mirror, reflecting exactly what I wanted to see. She listened not to understand, but to gather information: my financial standing, my love for David, my quiet loneliness. My vulnerability was her blueprint, and she was building something on it, something I would one day realize was not a home, but a trap. My love for her was unconditional, and so was my support. After a year of their courtship, David proposed, and they came to me with the timid, hopeful look of young adults ready to start their lives. They had a problem, of course: not enough money for a down payment. My savings account, a quiet pool of money sitting untouched since Robert's death, was the first thing I thought of. It wasn't a sacrifice to me. It was an investment in their happiness, in my own continued purpose. I wrote them a check, large enough to buy a beautiful house in a quiet neighborhood. My money was never just money. It was love made tangible. I remember Robert once telling me that love is like a bank account. You put in more than you take out, and you trust that the balance will always be there. I was a professional investor in this family. I bought them a new car when their old one broke down, a shiny silver sedan that Victoria adored. I paid their monthly utility bills just so they wouldn't have to worry about it. I'd fill their fridge with groceries every Sunday, a small ritual of a mother's care. I wasn't a fool. I saw my money flowing out, but I believed it was flowing into a place of great value, the foundation of a happy, secure family. Every dollar was a brick, and with every brick, I felt like I was building my own happiness right along with theirs. I didn't see the transaction. I saw the affection in Victoria's eyes, the gratitude in her voice. When she'd call me, her voice filled with feigned stress over an overdue bill, I didn't hear a request for money. I heard a desperate plea from my daughter, and my heart would leap to help. The culmination of this blissful illusion was a family dinner we had one evening. The house was filled with the aroma of roasted chicken. David was laughing as he told a story about work, and Victoria was sitting beside me, her hand resting on mine. The late afternoon sun streamed through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, making everything seem to shimmer with a magical quality. I looked at David, so happy and settled, and then at Victoria, so beautiful and loving. In that moment, surrounded by the warmth of a life I had so carefully nurtured, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. I had done it. I had built a legacy. My husband's memory was honored, my son was thriving, and I had found the daughter I had always prayed for. I sat there, my heart full, my eyes brimming with the kind of tears that only happiness can produce. I was a mother again, a full-time one. My purpose was renewed. This, I thought to myself, is what a perfect family looks like. It was a beautiful picture, painted with my love, my sacrifice, and the unspoken belief that my life's work was finally complete. The irony of that thought would haunt me for years. It was a perfect beginning, yes, but it was also the beginning of the end. The perfect picture, I soon learned, was painted on a canvas too thin to hold the weight of a true family. It was a beautiful, fleeting mirage, shimmering under the light of my unconditional love. The first crack appeared not with a sudden fracture, but with a whisper, a subtle shift in the air that a mother's ear is tuned to hear. It began with the phone. Victoria had a habit of keeping her phone close, a modern-day security blanket. I never thought much of it until I noticed the small, telltale signs. There were calls that she'd answer with a strange, clipped tone, her voice dropping to a near whisper as she'd slip into the pantry or step out onto the porch. "I'm in the middle of something," she would say, and the words were innocuous enough, but the delivery was wrong. It was a lie in the clothes of the truth. When she returned, her cheeks would be flushed, and she'd offer a flimsy excuse, something about her old job or a difficult client. I would nod and smile, but the knot in my stomach tightened a little each time. A mother's heart is a peculiar compass. It points to a child's needs even before they are spoken. But what happens when the child is not your own, and their needs are not of the heart, but of a different, colder kind? I was so used to reading her every need, a new dress, help with a bill, a car repair, that I had been deaf to her secrets. She was a master of the double life, and I, in my blind affection, was her unwitting accomplice. Then came the work trips. At first, they were plausible. A conference in Chicago, a training seminar in Dallas, but they became more frequent and the excuses more vague. She'd say a hotel room was needed to focus or that the travel expenses were good for tax purposes. David, bless his naive heart, never questioned a thing. He was so consumed by his own work and so trusting of his wife that her flimsy explanations were all the evidence he needed. He was a good man, my son, and his goodness was a vulnerability she exploited with surgical precision. I, however, started to notice the details that didn't align. A picture on her social media, quickly deleted, showed her in a different city than the one she claimed to be in. The clothes she packed for a business meeting were not the suits and blouses she would normally wear, but flowing dresses and casual jeans. Once I saw her luggage sitting by the door, and the tag was from a flight she had taken just a week earlier, but it was for a different destination altogether. A small, insignificant detail that to a loving mother felt like a grain of sand lodged in her shoe. I could still walk, still smile, still pour her a glass of iced tea, but with every step the discomfort grew. The greatest tragedies, I've learned, don't start with explosions. They begin with a single, tiny, almost imperceptible crack. I remember one Friday morning as I was packing groceries into a bag to take over to their house. Another small gesture of my love, I caught a glimpse of her notebook lying on the counter. It was a plain, black leather journal that she often carried. I never would have looked at it, but a single phrase, scrawled on a page she had left open, caught my eye. It was a number, followed by a name, 484-938-1234. Liam. My mind, the same mind that could remember my late husband's favorite song lyrics and the birthdays of all my relatives, could not place that name. It wasn't David's work number or any friend I knew of. It was just a name, a number, and a prickle of cold fear down my spine. My love for Victoria was so deep that I immediately started creating a story to explain it away. Maybe it was an old friend, an acquaintance from her hometown. Maybe it was a number for a business she was thinking of starting. 1,000 possibilities flooded my mind, all designed to protect the image of the daughter I had come to adore. Love, I realized, is a powerful self-deception. It can convince you that the sky is purple when all the world sees blue. The breaking point arrived one Tuesday. I was visiting them while David was at work. Victoria was in the bedroom, packing for yet another business trip. She called out to me to help her find a specific necklace in her jewelry box. As I rummaged through the tangle of chains and earrings, a small, worn photograph slipped out from a hidden compartment. It was not a picture of David and her on their wedding day, not a photo from a family vacation. It was a candid snapshot. In the photo, Victoria was standing on a beach, her arm wrapped around a man I had never seen before. A little boy, no older than 5, was holding her other hand, his face lit up with a joyous, dimpled smile. They looked like a family, a real one. A chill ran through my veins, colder than any winter I had ever known. The man in the photograph was not David. The little boy was not a child I had ever met. The world around me seemed to grow still, the gentle sound of the air conditioning, the rustle of Victoria's clothes, all faded into a dull, muffled buzz. I looked at the little boy's face again. I saw a hint of a familiar smile, a shared curve of the chin, and an undeniable truth settled upon me like a shroud. In that single, agonizing moment, the canvas of my perfect family was ripped in two. The hydrangeas, the heartfelt texts, the quiet dinners, they were all a carefully orchestrated lie. I felt a profound silence inside me, a stillness that comes when something fundamental has been destroyed. The loving, maternal compass that had guided my life for so long had been fooled. And now, for the first time in years, it was pointing towards a terrifying, unknown truth. And in that moment, I knew I had to follow it. The photograph of Victoria, the man, and the child lay on the palm of my hand like a stone in a stream, unmoving and cold. My first instinct was to tear it up, to destroy the evidence and pretend I had never seen it. But a strange, chilling clarity settled over me. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was a mystery, a puzzle with 1,000 scattered pieces that suddenly, horribly, began to make sense. The whispered phone calls, the vague work trips, the money she seemed to need for endless phantom emergencies, they were not signs of a happy young woman's stress. They were the symptoms of a double life. A detective, I learned in that moment, is not a job you apply for. It is a state of being you are forced into when the world you thought was real turns out to be a fiction. I was no longer a mother, a widow, or a friend. I was a quiet observer, a ghost in my own home, watching my son and his wife as if for the first time. The silence between us was no longer comfortable. It was a living thing, filled with my unspoken questions and their unknown answers. I decided not to confront them. Not yet. A confrontation without proof is just an emotional outburst, easily dismissed as a confused old woman's paranoia. I had to know everything. I had to see the whole, unvarnished truth, no matter how painful it was. I had to be a surgeon, cutting open the body of my family to see what was truly beating inside. My first call was to a private investigator, not the kind you see in the movies, with a trench coat and a fedora. Mr. Thomas was a quiet, unassuming man with a kind face and tired eyes who ran an office above a laundromat. I told him a story that was a fraction of the truth. I said I was concerned about a young relative who had recently moved to a new city and was not being entirely honest about her life. I gave him the name on the flight ticket and the name Liam from the notebook. I did not mention my son, my daughter-in-law, or my own profound grief. I spoke as though I were a stranger, cold and detached. He listened, nodded, and gave me a price. Sometimes, he said in a voice as soft as a whisper, what you find is not what you were looking for. He was a man who understood the nature of hidden things, and so began my life of silent surveillance. I would call Mr. Thomas every few days, and with each call, a new piece of my world would crumble. He found the man, Liam, in a different city. He was a business owner, seemingly respectable. He found a young boy named Leo, living in the same home, attending a local school. My heart ached for that little boy, a child caught in a web he didn't weave. The most damning evidence came a week later. Mr. Thomas had run a background check. Victoria had 2 social security numbers. She had legally changed her name 3 years ago, just months before meeting David. Her original name, her true name, was Victoria Brooks, and under that name, she had a legal marriage record to a man named Liam Carter. The marriage was still active, they had never divorced, and the child, Leo, was listed on the birth certificate with both their names. The truth was not a whisper anymore, it was a roar. Victoria hadn't just deceived me, she had committed a crime. She had entered my son's life, and mine, not with love but with a premeditated plan. The perfect daughter I had been so grateful for was a skilled con artist, a professional predator, and her prey was my family's fortune. I spent sleepless nights in my living room, surrounded by the furniture I had bought for them, looking at the photographs of my son and his wife that hung on the walls. With every piece of information Mr. Thomas gave me, I was forced to re-examine my memories. Was that hug she gave me on my birthday genuine, or was she just securing her investment? Was her praise for my cooking a sign of affection, or was it the sound of a parasite feeding? My love, the one thing I thought was pure and unassailable, was suddenly tainted, a bitter poison. The sacrifice I had made, a lifetime of saving and a husband's hard-earned legacy, was now just a tool for someone else's greed. The worst part of it all was the thought of David. How could he have been so blind? Or was he complicit? The possibility was a dagger to my heart. Was my own son, my one single legacy, part of this monstrous lie? I chose to believe he was an innocent victim, just as I was. His love for her, so genuine and pure, must have blinded him just as mine had. It was the only way I could make sense of a world that had become completely upside down. I sat with Mr. Thomas's final report, marriage certificates, birth records, financial transfers that Victoria had been making to an unknown account. Each document was a tombstone for a lie I had once held dear. My trust, my love, my peace of mind, all buried under a mountain of carefully fabricated truths. I was not just a mother betrayed. I was a person who had lost a fundamental sense of what was real. The silent investigation was over. It had not given me the answers I wanted, that it was all a big misunderstanding. Instead, it had given me the truth. A cold, hard, unblinking truth that left me with only one choice. My love had been an open door for their greed. Now, it was time to lock it. The report from Mr. Thomas sat on my coffee table, a plain manila folder that contained the truth. For 2 days, I had looked at it, touched it, felt the weight of its contents. A marriage certificate, a birth record, financial transfers to an anonymous account. They weren't just documents, they were the shattered remains of my life. My grief, a bottomless pit I had fallen into, was now being filled with something new, something cold and hard and sharp. Resolve. I had to confront her, not with tears, not with accusations, but with the cold, unassailable facts. I drove to their house, the one I had bought, on a Friday afternoon. The sun was shining, the hydrangeas I had planted were in full bloom, and everything looked, on the surface, just as perfect as it had always been. The house was a monument to a lie. I unlocked the front door, with the key I had given them, and walked into the living room. Victoria was curled up on the couch, reading, the couch I had bought. She looked up, her face softening with a smile that I now knew was a performance. "Martha, what a surprise. Come in, let me get you a tea," she said, her voice like a lullaby. I sat down on the armchair opposite her, my hands folded calmly in my lap. The manila folder was on the table between us. I met her gaze, and for the first time I didn't see the daughter I had longed for. I saw an actor on a stage, ready for her final act. "I'm fine, dear," I said, my voice steady, surprising even myself. "I just wanted to talk about something I've been thinking about a lot lately." Her eyes darted to the folder, but she quickly masked her curiosity with feigned concern. "Is everything all right, Martha? You look a little tired." "I'm tired of a great many things, Victoria," I replied, the words a gentle stone skipping across the surface of a pond. "I'm tired of lies. I'm tired of secrets." The smile on her face faltered. A flicker of something, fear, anger, crossed her features before she smoothed it away. "I don't understand," she said, her voice now filled with a fragile innocence. "Is this about the money? We just had a tough month, but I promise we'll be better about it." "This isn't about money, Victoria," I said, and for the first time the word money didn't feel like a confession, but a weapon. "Not in the way you think it is." I reached out and slowly, deliberately pushed the folder towards her. "This is about truth." She looked at the folder, then at me. For a moment, she was silent. Her mind, I could almost hear it working, searching for an excuse, a new performance to deliver. Then her eyes welled up with tears. Real tears, I thought, but born of frustration, not sadness. She looked at me, her face a masterpiece of sorrow and betrayal. "How could you, Martha? To bring a lawyer to our family home? To question me like this? You've changed so much. Is it because of David? Is he mad at me? We've tried to be good. To save money." Her voice trembled with a practiced hurt that once would have brought me to my knees. But I no longer had knees to bend. I was a mountain now. I was a fortress. I stared at her, and the silence stretched between us, a cold, hard expanse. "Don't," I said, my voice a quiet command. "Don't you dare try to manipulate me with your crocodile tears." I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a low, cold whisper. "I know about Liam. I know about the house. I know about your son, Leo." The effect was instantaneous and absolute. The tears stopped. Her face, which had been a mask of angelic sorrow, went completely blank, then slowly, horribly, began to harden. The soft, gentle lines of her mouth became a thin, cruel slash. Her eyes, once pools of feigned affection, were now 2 chips of ice. The perfect facade I had adored for 3 years didn't just crack, it shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. She laughed. It wasn't a sound of amusement, but of a broken, ugly thing. "You found out," she said, her voice stripped of all emotion, a cold, empty drone. "So what? You're an old woman, you had everything. What's the big deal? You got a daughter and we got a little help. It was a fair trade." My heart, which I thought had nothing left to break, gave a painful lurch. "A fair trade?" I whispered. "You stole my son's life. You used him. You used me. You were never my daughter. You were just a thief." Her laughter grew louder, more derisive. She stood up, pacing the living room. "A thief? You practically threw it all at me. You were so desperate for a daughter, for a family, you would have done anything. I just gave you what you wanted, and you gave me what I wanted. We had a deal, Martha. We just never said it out loud." She pointed a manicured finger at me. "You're a fool. You saw what you wanted to see. You should be thanking me. I gave you purpose. I gave you someone to spoil, someone to give all that useless money to. It was a service, Martha. I was a service." I stood up, my body shaking not with fear, but with a righteous rage that had been dormant for too long. "You were a cancer," I said, my voice rising for the first time, "and I let you poison my family for 3 years. But it ends now." She sneered. "Oh, it ends now, and what will you do? Tell David? He won't believe you. He loves me. You can show him all your little papers, but in the end he'll choose me. He'll always choose me." The words were a brutal, final blow. I looked around the room at the furniture, the photos, the house that now felt alien and cold. I had poured my heart into this home, into this family, and all of it was a stage for a terrible play. I turned and walked to the door. I didn't have to tell David anything. Her words had done it all. She had shown me her true face, and in doing so, she had shown me the bitter, terrible truth of my son's love. I walked out of that house and I did not look back. The front door closed behind me with a quiet click, sealing the end of my perfect family and the beginning of a cold, lonely war. The engine of my car hummed a quiet, consistent tune. It was the only sound I could hear, a low, steady thrum that was the antithesis of the scream in my heart. I drove away from the house that was no longer a home, but a monument to a lie. The perfect picture was shattered, and the pieces were sharp, digging into my skin. For a moment, I considered driving to David's office to confront my son with the ugliness of his wife, to see if his love could withstand the truth. But Victoria's words, her cruel laughter and her cold confidence echoed in my ears. "He'll always choose me." The truth, I knew, was a fragile thing, easily twisted and dismissed by a love that was blind. The raw fury I felt began to recede, replaced by a cold, quiet determination. Grief is a storm, but resolve is a quiet sea. I was no longer a weeping mother, a broken victim. I was a person who had been robbed, and I was going to get back what was mine. It was not just about the money, though there was a great deal of that. It was about my dignity, my peace of mind, and the memory of the man who had worked so hard to give me a life of comfort. Robert's legacy was not meant to be a tool for a con artist. My first act of war was to find a soldier. I drove not to my home, but to the office of Mr. Paul Harrison. He was an old friend of Robert's, a family law attorney with a reputation for being as sharp as he was scrupulous. His office, filled with stacks of books and the scent of old paper, was a world away from the emotional battlefield I had just left. He listened patiently as I laid out the story, my voice a flat, unemotional drone as I recounted the years of sacrifice, the weeks of secret investigation, and the brutal confrontation. I didn't cry. There were no tears left. When I finished, Mr. Harrison was silent for a long moment. He leaned back in his leather chair, a hand stroking his chin. "Martha," he said, his voice gentle but firm, "I'm so very sorry. This is a classic case of elder financial exploitation." The words were like a cold compress on my burning skin. They validated my pain, transforming my emotional wound into a legal one. The fact that she's still married to another man makes this a strong case for fraud, not just against you, but against your son as well. That night, I didn't sleep. My mind, once a canvas for perfect family portraits, was now a chessboard. Every move I made had to be tactical, logical, and devoid of emotion. I knew their next step would be to call, to beg, to manipulate. So my first move was to cut them off entirely. The next morning, before the bank opened, I was standing outside, waiting. I went to a different teller, a young woman who didn't know me, and requested to close the joint account I had with David. I transferred my money to a new account under my name only. I instructed the bank to block all future transfers from my accounts to theirs. Every click of the keyboard, every signature I made, was an act of reclamation. I wasn't just moving numbers, I was rebuilding a fortress. After the bank, I met Mr. Harrison again. We spent hours reviewing my financial records, the ones I had painstakingly documented for years. He whistled low when he saw the total sum. "Martha, in just 3 years, you have paid out over $100,000. The number felt abstract, a meaningless sum that had bought a house of cards. But to Mr. Harrison, it was concrete, hard evidence of their greed. He had me sign a series of documents, a new will that explicitly disinherited David and Victoria, a power of attorney for Mr. Harrison himself should the need arise, and a formal cease and desist letter to be sent to their home. "This is just the first step," he said as I signed the final paper. "Once they realize the money is gone, they will escalate. They will try to scare you, to manipulate you, to make you feel guilty. But you must not waver. You have done nothing wrong. You have simply taken back what is rightfully yours." I returned to my empty house. It didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt safe. The silence wasn't a void to be filled. It was a sanctuary. For the first time in years, the money in my bank account felt like my own. My pension, Robert's inheritance, it was all mine to use as I saw fit. I could travel, I could start a new hobby, I could donate it all to charity. The possibilities were endless and they were all mine. My phone rang. The screen showed David's name. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. The sound, which used to fill me with a sense of purpose, now felt like an invasion. I turned the phone off completely. The silence that followed was a victory. The first small battle had been won. The war was just beginning, but for the first time in a long time, I was ready to fight. I was no longer a mother feeding a parasitic family. I was a woman standing on her own, a shield of resolve around her heart. The silence that followed the click of my phone was not empty. It was full of new things. It was the sound of a woman's peace, a widow's quiet strength, a mother's resolve finally taking root. I did not turn the phone back on. The world could wait. For too long, my world had been an emergency call from them, a constant fire to put out with my own hard-earned money. The silence was a sanctuary, and I was not ready to leave it. For a few days, a strange peace settled over my house. I made coffee in the morning and read the paper. I tended to my garden, pulling weeds that had been choking my rose bushes for months. I did all the small, simple things that had once felt like luxuries I couldn't afford because there was always an urgent need from them, an emergency that only my money could solve. My life, which had been a series of transactions, was now a series of quiet, personal acts. But the silence was a lie. I knew it. The moment the rent money didn't hit their bank account, the peace would shatter. A parasite doesn't simply give up when its host stops feeding it. It gets desperate. It gets angry. And I knew they were desperate. They had built a life on my generosity, a house of cards I had just pulled the foundation from. The first blow didn't come in the form of a call. It came as a visit. I saw their car pull into my driveway on my security camera, a new addition to my life, a shield I had purchased from the old hardware store owner who had known my husband. I watched them from my window, 2 figures standing on my porch, their faces a mix of confusion and building panic. David was shaking his head, trying my doorbell. Victoria was looking around, her eyes darting to my windows, a cold, hungry glint in them. I did not answer the door. I watched as they left, defeated for the moment. My heart was not in my throat. It was a stone in my chest, heavy and unmoving. The next day the phone calls began. They didn't stop. They rang my landline from unknown numbers, from their friends' phones, from their work phones. They sent a flood of text messages to the old phone I had not turned back on, a digital cry for help that I knew was just a demand for money. I ignored it all. I was not a heartless woman. I was a woman who had finally learned the difference between love and a transaction. Finally, a call came from an unknown number on my landline. My hand hovered over the receiver. My old self would have answered instantly, a mother leaping to her child's rescue. But my new self waited, letting the phone ring 3 times before picking it up. "Martha, oh my God, thank God you answered. It's Victoria." Her voice, which had once been a smooth, sugary concoction, was now raw with panic. The facade was gone, shattered. "What do you want, Victoria?" My voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "What do I want?" "Martha, the rent. The landlord is threatening to evict us. We told him the money was coming, that you were just late with the transfer. He's saying we have 24 hours. The practiced plea was gone, replaced by a desperate, frantic edge. "You forgot to transfer it, right? You must have forgotten." "I didn't forget," I said calmly. A beat of silence on the other end. I could almost hear her brain short-circuiting. What do you mean you didn't forget? You've always paid it. You have to pay it, Martha. We'll be on the street." "You're not on the street, Victoria," I said. "You're in the house I bought for you, driving the car I paid for. And as for the rent, that is your responsibility now, not mine." The anger in her voice was a physical thing. My responsibility. After all the years you promised to take care of us, you're a cruel, selfish old woman. I'm a woman who just paid out over $100,000 for a life that wasn't hers to live. I replied, the words a hammer hitting a nail. And my promise was never to fund a marriage based on lies and deceit. The line went dead. The silence was louder this time, filled with the echo of her unmasked rage. I put the phone down, my hand shaking slightly. I was not immune to her hatred, but I was no longer a victim of it. Moments later, the phone rang again. It was David. "Mom, what's going on? Victoria's hysterical. The landlord called, he said you didn't pay. What happened?" His voice was a blend of confusion and annoyance. "You should ask your wife, David," I said. "She can tell you. I'm no longer paying your rent or your car or your bills. I've taken back my money." "But why? You promised. You're our mother, Mom. You can't just abandon us." The accusation was so familiar, so old. For years, I had believed that my love was a service I had to provide to keep him, to keep my family. "I didn't abandon you, David," I said, my voice heavy with a grief that was deeper than anger. "You abandoned me when you let her lie to me for 3 years. When you took my money, my love, and my sacrifice and gave it to a woman who had another husband and another child. That's abandonment." "What are you talking about?" He stammered, the confidence in his voice crumbling. "Mom, you're not making sense. You're being irrational. You're acting crazy. This is a terrible misunderstanding. If you don't help us, we'll lose everything. You'll be responsible." "I am responsible," I said. "I am responsible for my own life now. And you, David, at 35 years old, are responsible for yours." There was a long pause. I could hear him breathing, the sound of a man cornered. Then, his voice, when it came, was no longer my son's. It was a cold, hard voice I didn't recognize. "Fine, Mom. If you want to do it this way, we'll do it this way. You think you can just cut us off and get away with it? You have a lot of money, Mom, and you know what they do with old people who start acting crazy and cutting off their family. They put them in a home and someone else takes care of their money. We'll see you in court." The threat hung in the air, a final, chilling blow. I hung up the phone, my hand steady. the war was no longer just about money. It was about my sanity, my freedom, and my very soul. I had just taken a step onto a battlefield I never knew existed, but I was no longer an innocent bystander. I was a combatant, and for the first time in years, I was not afraid. I was ready. His words hung in the air long after the call ended. "We'll see you in court." The phrase was a physical thing, a gauntlet thrown down, a challenge that stripped away the last vestiges of family. The phone in my hand felt suddenly heavy, not with the weight of the device itself, but with the full force of their betrayal. It was no longer about a secret marriage or stolen money. It was about a declaration of war. My son, the boy I had raised alone, was willing to use the legal system to have me declared incompetent, to steal what remained of my life, my freedom, and my dignity. I didn't panic. The fear I had felt in the beginning, the fear of a perfect world unraveling, had been replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. When a person has nothing left to lose, they become invincible. My heart was already broken. What more could they take? I sat down at my kitchen table, the very same one where I had planned birthday parties and counted out bills for their rent, and felt a strange sense of calm. The game had changed. It was no longer about love or sentiment. It was about facts, law, and justice. The next day I called Mr. Harrison. His voice was calm and steady, a lighthouse in a storm. "Martha," he said, as if he had been expecting my call, "I'm assuming they've made contact. They've threatened to sue me. They said they would have me declared incompetent and take control of my finances." I replied, my voice as flat as a newspaper headline. "Mr." Harrison's sigh was a sound of professional weariness. "It's a common tactic in these cases. The moment the source of income is gone, they resort to legal coercion. It's an act of desperation, but we are prepared." He told me about the legal process, about their need to prove my mental incapacity, and about our strong evidence of their fraud. He explained that we would need to hire a reputable psychiatrist for an independent evaluation to counter any claims they might make. "The burden of proof is on them," he reassured me, "and we have the documentation to prove their motivation is greed, not genuine concern." The following week, the official papers arrived. A summons. A formal petition to the court requesting guardianship over me, citing my erratic financial behavior and sudden social withdrawal. I read the words, and for a moment I saw the picture they were painting. A frail, confused old woman, driven mad by loneliness and the sudden onset of dementia. It was a vile caricature, but I knew it was designed to appeal to the court's sympathy. They had taken my newfound strength and reframed it as a sign of mental decline. I met with Dr. Moore, the psychiatrist Mr. Harrison recommended. She was a kind, insightful woman with a calm demeanor. We spent 2 hours talking. She asked me questions about my memory, my daily life, my finances, and my relationships. I told her the whole story, not just about the betrayal, but about the years of silent sacrifice, of pouring my life into a relationship that had turned out to be a transaction. She didn't just listen, she heard me. She saw the pain, the anger, and the resolve that had replaced it. At the end of our session, she looked at me with genuine compassion. "Mrs. Richter," she said, using my last name for the first time. "You are not only mentally competent, but your cognitive function is excellent. Your decision to cease financial support for your son and daughter-in-law, given the circumstances you've described, is entirely rational. It is the action of a person protecting their assets from exploitation, not a sign of mental decline." Her words were a balm. They confirmed what I already knew in my heart. I wasn't crazy. I was a survivor. But Victoria and David were not done. Their lies, like weeds, grew in the dark. They contacted my neighbors, spreading rumors about my strange behavior. They told my mailman that I was acting erratically. They contacted the local office of senior services, filing a report that I was at risk. Their campaign of falsehoods was relentless, a psychological warfare designed to isolate me and to make their case to the court. I realized that this wasn't just a legal battle. It was a fight for the narrative. They wanted to write my story as one of a confused old woman. I was determined to tell the truth. Mr. Harrison advised me to document everything, every visit from them, every call, every piece of gossip I heard from a neighbor. The surveillance cameras, once a symbol of my paranoia, were now a tool of my defense, recording every time they drove by, every time they lingered outside my house. My world, which had once been so small and confined to a false family, began to expand. I reconnected with old friends. I started going to the community center. I met Elena, a kind neighbor who had seen everything and offered her unwavering support. I was no longer a widow hiding from the world. I was a woman building a new one, a life of my own, one built on a foundation of truth and genuine connection. The legal battle had begun, but it wasn't just a fight in a courtroom. It was a fight for my right to be a person, not a resource, to be a mother who had raised a child, not a bank account that had been drained. They saw me as a problem to be solved, an obstacle to their comfortable lives. But I was not an obstacle. I was a force of nature, a mother who had finally learned to protect herself. The war was on, and for the first time in years, I was not just on the defensive. I was ready to fight. The courtroom air was thick with the scent of old paper and stale coffee, a fitting atmosphere for the lies about to be spun. I sat beside Mr. Harrison, my back straight, my hands clasped in my lap. Opposite me sat David and Victoria, dressed in suits I knew they couldn't afford on their own. Victoria's face was a mask of practiced sorrow, her eyes fixed on me with a look of pained betrayal. My heart, once a fragile thing, was now a solid stone. I felt nothing for her, only a grim determination. This wasn't a family drama, it was a criminal enterprise, and I was here to watch its collapse. Their lawyer, a man with a booming voice and a predatory smile, began the proceedings. He painted a portrait of a lonely, confused old woman who had suddenly, inexplicably, turned on her loving children. He presented fabricated evidence. A doctor's bill I had supposedly refused to pay, a note from a concerned neighbor about my erratic behavior, and an affidavit from a pharmacist claiming I had been hoarding medication. I listened to the lies, each one a twist of the knife, and I felt a wave of nausea. They were not just trying to take my money, they were trying to erase me. Victoria was the first to take the stand. Her voice, choked with tears, described our beautiful relationship and how I had been like a second mother. She recounted stories of my generosity, twisting my sacrifices into proof of my irrationality. We were worried about her, she sobbed, when she cut off all contact. She stopped answering our calls, our texts. We thought something terrible had happened to her. The performance was so convincing, so melodramatic that a few people in the gallery sighed with sympathy. When Mr. Harrison rose to cross-examine her, the tone in the room shifted. He did not raise his voice. He simply spoke with the quiet authority of a man who held all the cards. "Mrs. Brooks," he began, using her original name. A visible shudder ran through Victoria's body. "Can you confirm for the court that your legal name is, in fact, Victoria Brooks?" Her face went pale. It was. It's Victoria Richter now." "No," Mr. Harrison said, his voice a quiet hammer blow. "According to this document," he held up the marriage certificate, "your legal name is still Victoria Carter, and you are, in fact, still married to a Mr. Liam Carter. Is that correct?" The silence in the room was deafening. Victoria stammered, her teary facade crumbling. That's a mistake. That's an old record." Mr. Harrison did not relent. And is it also a mistake that you have a son with Mr. Carter, a boy named Leo who is 5 years old? He then presented the birth certificate. The final mask fell. The tears were gone, replaced by a look of sheer, cold hatred. She was cornered. She had nothing left to say. David was next. He looked pale and nervous, a boy caught between two worlds he couldn't navigate. He testified about my unpredictable behavior and how I had suddenly become paranoid. He spoke of how he and Victoria were just trying to help me. Mr. Harrison's cross-examination of David was a master class in subtlety. Mr. Richter, he began, in the last 3 years, how much money has your mother given you and your wife? David shifted uncomfortably. I don't know the exact amount. Does the figure of $100,000 sound about right? The number, when spoken aloud, was a punch in the gut to everyone in the room. And is it also true that when you and your wife were cut off, your immediate action was not to call an ambulance for your supposedly mentally unstable mother, but to hire a lawyer to sue her for her assets? David stammered, We just wanted to help her, to protect her. You wanted to help her, Mr. Harrison's voice was filled with a quiet incredulity. By having her declared legally incompetent, by taking control of her life, or did you just want to help yourselves to her money? The questions were simple, direct, and devastating. The case they had built on lies was collapsing. My turn came next. I walked to the witness stand, my heart now a steady, unyielding drum. I told my story. I talked about the years of sacrifice, about treating Victoria like my own daughter, about the money I had poured into their lives. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply presented the truth, calmly and clearly. I was a witness to my own life, and for the first time, I was the one holding the narrative. In his closing argument, Mr. Harrison laid out the evidence in a clear, concise manner. He spoke of my flawless mental evaluation from a leading psychiatrist. He spoke of their motive, their deceit, and their willingness to betray a mother's love for financial gain. This is not a case of a confused elderly woman, he concluded, his voice ringing with a powerful sense of justice. This is a case of a loving mother who finally found the strength to protect herself from a parasitic relationship. The plaintiffs are not here out of concern. They are here because the well they have been drinking from has finally run dry. The judge, a serious man with kind eyes, retired to deliberate. The waiting was the hardest part. But as I sat there, I felt a strange sense of peace. The truth was out. The lies were exposed. No matter what the judge decided, I had won. I had not only regained control of my life, I had reclaimed my dignity. The war had been ugly, but the truth, I had learned, was the most powerful weapon of all. The 2 hours the judge was gone felt like 2 years. The courtroom, once a stage for deceit, was now a vacuum of silence. David and Victoria sat across the room, whispering furiously with their lawyer. Their masks had fallen completely. The tears were gone, the gentle pleas replaced by venomous glares. I saw the true face of my son and his wife, two people cornered, their entitlement turning to rage. I no longer saw the boy I raised, only a stranger consumed by greed. The pain of that realization was a ghost that haunted me, but it could no longer harm me. My focus, instead, was on the people who sat behind me. Eleanor, my neighbor, and my friends from the garden club, their faces etched with quiet concern. They had come to support me, not just with their presence, but with their very being. They were the witnesses to my transformation, the new family I had found. Their love was real, unburdened by transaction. It was a silent testament to the fact that I was not alone. When the judge returned, the air in the courtroom shifted. He settled into his seat, his gaze sweeping over the room, calm and deliberate. He cleared his throat. After reviewing all the evidence presented, he began, his voice cutting through the tension, This court has reached a decision. He spoke for 10 minutes, but the words that mattered were carved into my soul. He confirmed the validity of Mr. Harrison's evidence. The marriage and birth certificates, the extensive financial documentation of their exploitation, and the psychiatric evaluation from Dr. Moore. He meticulously dismantled every lie Victoria and David had built, piece by painful piece. He spoke of my impeccable mental and physical condition and my completely rational decision to protect my assets. He pointed out the clear motivation of the plaintiffs, driven not by concern but by financial interest. Then, with a final, definitive tone, he delivered the verdict. The court finds that Mrs. Renate Richter is in full and complete possession of her mental faculties. The request for legal guardianship is hereby denied. A collective gasp swept through the courtroom. I felt a wave of relief so profound that it took my breath away. It wasn't just a legal victory. It was the moment I was given my life back. The man who had once been my son looked at me with an expression of pure, unadulterated hatred. He had not won. He had lost, not just the money, but the very last sliver of my heart. He had gambled on my love and my sanity, and he had lost on both accounts. As Mr. Harrison patted my shoulder, a small, genuine smile on his face, I looked at Victoria. Her face, a mask of fury, was a perfect reflection of the ugliness that had been hiding beneath the surface for so long. She had been so confident, so arrogant in her manipulation. She truly believed she could win. But the truth, I learned, is a weapon more powerful than any lie. We left the courtroom and walked into the sunlight. It felt warmer, brighter than it had in months. My friends enveloped me in a group hug. I could feel their genuine joy, their pure love. "You did it, Martha," Eleanor said, her voice filled with pride. "You fought for yourself." In the car, Mr. Harrison was all business, discussing the next steps. "They may appeal, but it's highly unlikely they'll win. We have a mountain of evidence. You can also press charges for fraud, but that's a personal decision." I thought about that for a moment. To pursue a criminal case against my own son? No, my purpose was not to imprison them. It was to free myself. The victory in court was enough. That night, my friends held a small celebration at my house. We ate, we laughed, we drank to justice. "You didn't just win a trial, Martha," my friend Alfreda said, her 80-year-old eyes filled with wisdom. "You won back your life. You chose freedom over a lie." Her words resonated deep within me. For 3 years, I had been a prisoner of my own generosity, trapped in a perfect picture that was nothing more than a cage. Now, the bars were gone. I stood on my porch that night, looking at the stars. The air was cool, the silence peaceful. I had lost a son, a daughter, and a family I thought I had. The pain of that loss was a part of me now, a scar that would always remind me of the battle I had fought. But in that emptiness, I also found something new. I found myself. I was not just a mother or a widow. I was a person. A woman who had learned that the most important person to love and protect was herself. The future was not a blank canvas anymore. It was an open road, and for the first time in years, I was ready to drive. The day after the verdict, I woke up to a silence that felt different from any I had known before. It was no longer the oppressive quiet of a house too big for one, or the anxious stillness of a life lived in constant crisis. It was the quiet of a blank page, the peaceful calm that comes after a storm. I looked out my window at the familiar street, and for the first time in years, the houses and trees didn't feel like a backdrop to a family drama. They felt like a neighborhood, a simple collection of homes filled with people living their own ordinary, complicated lives. My old routine was a relic of a past life. There was no need to check bank accounts, no reason to wait for a desperate call, no looming sense of dread. The money in my bank was mine, a testament to my freedom, not a tool for a lie. I made a cup of coffee and sat on my porch, watching the world wake up. A dog walker passed by, and we exchanged a simple smile and a good morning. It was a small moment, but it felt monumental. For so long, my interactions had been transactional. Now, they were human. My first act of my new life was to change the locks on my house. Mr. Harrison had advised it as a precaution, and Mr. Thomas, the investigator, came over to install them. As he worked, I told him the whole story, from the day I met Victoria to the verdict. He listened patiently, his hands working with practiced ease. "It's a shame, Martha," he said, not with pity, but with a quiet understanding. "People can be so good at hiding what they are. I was so good at hiding it from myself," I confessed. I wanted so badly to believe in that perfect family, I ignored every red flag. He finished his work and handed me a new set of keys. "The most important locks aren't on your doors, Martha. They are on your heart. You've learned to protect both." His words were a gift, a final piece of wisdom from the quiet man who had helped me find the truth. In the weeks that followed, I started filling the blank page of my life. I had postponed so much, believing my time and resources belonged to my son. I booked a trip to Italy, a place Robert and I had always dreamed of visiting. I enrolled in a painting class at the community center, something I had loved in my youth but had abandoned when David's needs had become my only focus. My new life wasn't about revenge, but about reclamation. I reconnected with old friends I had lost touch with. Our conversations were no longer about the trials and tribulations of David and Victoria. We talked about our lives, our dreams, our pasts, and our futures. I met Alfreda for coffee, and she told me stories of her own battles with a demanding family. "We all think we have to earn love," she said, "but true love is a free gift. The moment you have to pay for it, it's not love anymore." I realized that my generosity had not been a sign of love, but a sign of fear. I was so terrified of losing David, of being alone, that I had been willing to pay any price to keep a family that didn't even exist. I had confused my bank account with my heart, believing that the more I gave, the more love I would receive. But love, I now knew, was not an investment. It was a relationship based on mutual respect, not on a financial balance sheet. I sold the house. It was a beautiful home, but it was tainted with memories of lies. I took a small, beautiful apartment near the city center, a place that was my own, with no ghosts of a fabricated past. I donated a significant portion of my inheritance to a foundation that helped elderly people who were victims of financial exploitation. My money was no longer a tool of control for others, it was a tool for good. It was the first time in years that I felt proud of how I was spending it. One evening, my phone rang. It was an unknown number, and for a moment my heart jumped. It could be them, pleading or threatening, but I had a new resolve. I answered. It was a woman from the foundation, calling to thank me for my donation. We talked for an hour about the work they did, about the stories of hope they helped create. I realized that my pain had a purpose. It had given me the strength to not only save myself, but to help others. My new life was not lonely. It was full. I had friends who loved me for who I was, not for what I had. I had hobbies that brought me joy. I had the freedom to be myself, to make my own decisions, and to live my own truth. The perfect picture of a family I had once so desperately wanted was gone, but in its place was something far more valuable, a beautiful, imperfect, and completely genuine life. The past was a memory, a story I had survived. The future was unwritten, and for the first time in years, I was excited to be the one holding the pen. Months passed, and the rhythm of my new life became as natural as my own heartbeat. My days were no longer filled with the anxiety of waiting for a call or the dread of a surprise visit. Instead, they were filled with the simple joys of a life lived for myself. I spent my mornings in my painting class, my hands stained with paint, my mind lost in the colors on the canvas. I discovered a talent I had long since buried, a quiet passion that brought me a peace no amount of money ever could. My afternoons were spent volunteering at the foundation, hearing the stories of other people who had been betrayed by the very ones they loved most. We were an unlikely community, a group of survivors who had found a common bond in our shared pain and our newfound strength. I never heard from David or Victoria again. The lawsuit had been a financial burden on them, and the eviction from the house was a final, devastating blow. I heard through the grapevine that they had been forced to move to a smaller apartment and that Victoria had taken a job for the first time in years. The thought brought me no joy, no sense of triumph. It was simply the logical conclusion to a life built on a foundation of lies. They had used my money as a crutch, and without it, they were forced to learn to walk on their own. Perhaps, in their struggle, they would find a purpose that had nothing to do with greed. But that was their story now, not mine. The biggest change in my life was not external, but internal. The woman who had been so desperate for a family that she was willing to pay for it was gone. In her place was a woman who had learned that true love is not a transaction. I had confused love with a service, and I had nearly lost myself in the process. My late husband's words, "Love is like a bank account, you put in more than you take out," had been misinterpreted. I had put in 1,000 times more, expecting a return, but true love has no exchange rate. It is an end in itself. My last act of closure was a visit to Robert's grave. I hadn't been there since before the chaos began. The cemetery was quiet, a place of peaceful rest. I sat on the grass beside his headstone, and for the first time in years, I spoke to him not with sadness, but with a profound sense of peace. "Robert, my love," I whispered, "I think I finally understand. My heart wasn't meant to be a charity. It was meant to be a home. And for a while, I let a couple of strangers take over the lease. But I'm back now, and I'm taking care of it." The sun was setting, and the light cast a golden glow over the tombstones. I smiled, a real smile, a smile that reached my eyes and touched my soul. The journey had been long and painful. I had lost a son, a daughter, a family I had so desperately tried to build. But in that loss, I had found myself. I had found my voice. I had found my strength. Life, I had learned, is not about having a perfect picture. It is about having a real one. It is about the imperfections and the scars that make us who we are. My heart was no longer a blank canvas waiting to be painted. It was a masterpiece, filled with the deep, rich colors of pain and resilience, wisdom and peace. And so, my story ends. A story that began with a lie and ended with a truth. It is a story not just about family, but about the value of a single human life. The value of your own. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it brings a message of hope and strength to anyone who needs to hear it. Remember to cherish your loved ones and your family. But most importantly, remember to cherish yourself. I wish you all good health, a peaceful heart, and a life filled with happiness and love.